Honourable Member for Castries South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I just wish some people would not leave the gallery at this time. But thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Let me just, first of all, because I stand here, every time I stand here because the people of Castries South have invested their confidence in me to represent them, and by extension, because I'm representing them and sitting in the government, the Prime Minister has given me a portfolio that I can look at. But I also want to thank the people of Castries South. I want to thank the Prime Minister, my cabinet colleagues, but in particular the ministerial staff, as the members of the Ministry of Education, Human Resource Development and Labour. Mr. Speaker, the debate in this country sometimes goes to a point where it's ridiculous that sometimes people are beginning now to sideline public servants to suggest, because once people have habits, they would assume that everybody does the same things, that people do take decisions without having public servants do their work. I am one. I was in this house on the opposite side. I never questioned public servants. I was a public servant for 22 years. And I know that public servants do their work. And at some points, things will happen that public servants will make errors because they're human beings. But when you listen to the discourse in this country, you have to think that the public servants in this country are absolutely of no use to some people because of what they say about public servants. But Mr. Speaker, I wish you would just allow me to extend condolences to, as the Minister for Education, Human Resource Development and Labour, to extend condolences to the Sentuma family on the passing of Sir Danstan Sentuma. The reason I'm doing this, Mr. Speaker, because he worked most of his life with the Ministry of Education in the education system in helping with the development of art education in our system. So I want to thank the family on behalf of the government and people of St. Lucia in that regard. Also, Mr. Speaker, I just want to wish all the students who are engaged at this time, it's a time of the year, that all the students who are in the CSEC, the Caribbean Secondary Education Certificate exams, as well as the CAPE, the Caribbean Advanced Proficiency exam. I want to wish them all the best as they go through. Even today, even as we speak, probably they just finished information technology. So I want to wish them all the best, because the future of this country depends on how students do in their examinations. Mr. Speaker, I stand and I support the budget statements as presented by the Minister for Finance, the Prime Minister of this country. I continue to say that for a small developing country, Mr. Speaker, when approximately 15% of your national budget can go to education, there is something that you're doing right in that you're investing in the human resource development of your country. The human capital of our country is what's going to take us to where we want. We may not get there at the time that we want, but we ought to be very proud in this country of what we have done as a country. I think sometimes we give ourselves a lot of blows in this country, but if we were to compare ourselves next to others, what we've done with our education system over the last 36 years, I'd say, of independence, we ought to be very proud of our country. And I think successive governments have spent approximately 14 to 15% of the budget on education. And this year is no different. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry for Education, Human Resource Development and Labour, in particular the Ministry of Education, has always had what you call an education sector development plan. The last plan was from 2009 to 2014, and most of that came under the stewardship of the former Minister for Education, member for Mico South. And one of the things that I regret very much, Mr. Speaker, is that in the adversarial politics, we can disagree on a number of issues. But there are things that I refuse to argue in this country, whether I sit on the side of the government or in the opposition. For 5 years, I was sitting on the opposition benches. I never questioned in terms of whether the government had enough funds to spend in terms of our school plant, because this is a very troublesome area for all governments of this country. The best we can do is try to find the means to ensure that our students are comfortable in our schools. But we will never get like some countries where we will always be where we want. And I say the whole issue of the education plan and the adversarial politics I was talking about. And one would have expected that for some, and I do have a lot of respect for the member for Mico South. He may not think so, but I do get upset when I see him going into areas where he ought not to go, because he knows better. As a seasoned educator, I think he does. I have to give him that. He served as president of the Principal Association in this country. Sorry? He was it twice. But under his stewardship, a plan was developed, and I commend him for that plan, because the plan it was forward-looking. There were issues that I had to come in as a new minister to carry on with some of the works that he had, or some of the plans he had as a minister. But one of the biggest problems, I think, is at least there are issues that were left undone, and at least the member from Mico South, he as a seasoned professional could at least have some tete-a-tete with me. He could mention some of the issues, because we're both educators in the system. Mr. Speaker, I say all that because I agree with the member from Mico South that the government might not have enough allocated for the rehabilitation of schools. But again, we have to look at this in the context of what is available. If you take, Mr. Speaker, a simple project as the BEEP project, that BEEP project means, the acronym, it stands for the Basic Education Enhancement Project. I have tried to restrain myself in 3 previous budgets to avoid embarrassing the member for Mico South. Because the politics of the BIP, he was the direct architect of it. The person who was project manager under this BIP is the then minister's brother. They planned which schools would have been dealt with under the BIP. It's a shame sometimes to hear the former minister say certain things about some schools, because the then minister, who's the member for Mico South, his brother was allowed to retire, and then his brother was brought back into the ministry just about a month later to become the project manager for the BIP. But I've tried to restrain myself in attacking people on issues. But when the member goes and he talks about Mico, under his watch, the BIP project had what you call a condition survey. There are schools that have been refurbished under the BIP that did not need refurbishing urgently, as the Mico Secondary School. Because the Mico Secondary School, and here's what the people of St. Lucia should know. This government came into office. And in fact, before the government came to office, I was a member of parliament for Castries South in the opposition. And I stood year in, year out, asking the government to fix the Mico Infant School. Because I'm a teacher by profession. I don't care where the school is. Once I think it is necessary, I would ask for that. The member for Mico South, he was principal of the Mico Secondary School, you know. That was a school that should have been dear to your heart. If there was a condition survey to look at schools, because Mico is really in very bad shape. There is no doubt about it. The Mico Secondary School needs a lot of work. And I want to commend the Minister for Infrastructure for what he has done with the Mico Secondary School in the last 6 months. Mr. Speaker, my first year as minister, I went to the Mico Secondary School to be part of the distribution of laptops, and I was appalled at what I saw. Just less than a year after this, the last government was in office, and the minister who was the then Minister for Education was parliamentary rep, he's principal of a school, and for him to talk about this, it really hurts me because I'm somebody who tries to avoid. I will give people what goes for them, but I try to avoid going after senior people who I know have worked hard in this country. But Mr. James needs to be, the member for Micoud South, he irks me when he goes in areas where he knows he did nothing. And I want to thank the teachers of the Micoud Secondary School for their patience with this government as we try to settle the school for them. Because even now, right now, students have to take CSEC exams. And you have to imagine that we pray God that at least nothing happens in that interim that our students have to be displaced. The compassion of a Labour government, when we had to go on to put the school, the Micoud, 3 schools in Micoud, the Micoud Primary School, the Micoud Secondary School, and the Angers Secondary School had to be on shift to accommodate the students of the Micoud Secondary School. And the compassion of the government, the Minister of Finance, I wrote to the minister so that parents who had to divert their children from the Micoud Secondary School, Mr. Speaker, they didn't have to pay for it because you know why? The government of St. Lucia put an additional $70,000 to transport the students to the Angers Secondary School. And you know, it's commendable for the member for Micoud North. She did visit. She did show concern. But again, here we go. Right at his doorsteps, I traveled to the Angers school. I asked, maybe you came later, but I asked, because if you so much care about them, I asked, has the member for Micoud South visited you all? And the answer was no. You care about the people of Micoud so much that here, the member for Micoud South. Micoud on the whole. Because there's a trend with the last government, you know. Anything that happens in Micoud happens on the Labour Party. Because they take the people for granted. You know, Mr. Speaker, I am passionate about these things. I leave people alone, I said. But if you step in front of me, when I feel that you have not done anything, I will get at you. And I think that, as I said, there were 12 schools under the BIP, Mr. Speaker. 12 schools. And I don't think, and I'm saying this, that there are schools that were under the BIP that ought not to have been because they were not urgent. But I think Micoud Secondary was an urgent school. The government has spent lots of money in the last year on the Micoud Secondary School. It's not enough. But it's also now under the DVRP, and I commend the Minister of Finance for putting the Micoud Secondary School under the DVRP. It's not especially. We must take care of the people of St. Lucia, whether they're from Micoud or from Castries South. Because all of us are St. Lucian. There's not 2 St. Lucia. There's 1 St. Lucia. And the people have a choice if they decide that they want a particular representation. But what they have to say is, I can show you, Mr. Speaker, because this government has a record. The Micoud Infant School was dilapidated for years. And under this government today, the children of the Micoud Primary School can say they have a primary school. Mr. Speaker, we continue to move in the direction of fixing the infrastructure in our schools. Under the BIP, yes, 4 schools had been completed. And I heard the member for Micoud South say that we should put these schools under the ERP. But the very same member for Micoud South need to remember, under his watch as minister, and with the, in fact, maybe with the suggestion or the insight of the Minister of Finance, after Hurricane Thomas, the first 4 schools that were dealt with under the BIP, He knows that they were not part of the program, but they had to be brought in because there were serious issues with the schools, Denier Riviere combined, Saltibus combined. I think we're talking about the Derisseau combined, and there's one more school I can't remember. Oh, Dennery, the Dennery Primary School. These schools were dealt with, and I thought that's commendable. And I always feel that governments are going to be hard-pressed when it comes to which schools do you deal with. But if a condition survey was done, after all, I cannot see how Micoud was not part of the first set of schools that would have been dealt with. Mr. Speaker, we continue. There are 4 schools right now that are being addressed under the BIP. And the member was right. He said that there are some issues with the Vide-Bouteille, the Laguet combined, the Gordon and Walcott schools. These schools, the government will have to look for an ad loan to take care of these schools. But I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that Corinth Secondary is being refurbished at a price of over $6 million. And I want to commend the contractor, because you hear a lot of noise in this country sometimes. Again, I want to say, when I became Minister for Education, all these contracts, people had been pre-listed. All of them. Pre-qualified, that's the word. I never got involved in the politics of this. There's a Bajan company that is doing the Corinth Secondary School. But I think that's commendable because they are probably showing the best signs of progress with the 4 schools under construction. So I visited with the member for Barbono and the member for Grosley last week, Thursday. And I must say that I'm very pleased to report to the House that 3 of the projects are moving very well. That is Corinth, the Clendon Mason Memorial Secondary, and the Vieux-Fort Infant School. But I must say that there are some problems at Fonsa. And I hope that we will be, because right now the project is some 2.5 months behind schedule. All of these schools ought to be completed, Mr. Speaker.
Remember, I think your phone may be on, or there's a phone near that mic.
I don't have a phone there, Mr. Speaker. No. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I do not have any phones. There would be phone elsewhere, but not on this table. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want to continue to say that the Fonsa School, some $3.2 million is being invested in the refurbishment of the school. And I said there's some problems. Clendon Mason, some 6.9, approximately $7 million. And Vieux-Fort, approximately $2 million. And we hope that we can continue to get most of the infrastructure, the education infrastructure in this country upgraded to ensure that our students have conducive environments to receive their education. Mr. Speaker, there are other schools that have been put under the DVRP. As I said, the Micoud Secondary, the Choiseul Secondary School, Mr. Speaker, as we speak, this government has moved very quickly. The designs are completed. Right now, we are at the stage of almost having a contract being given. And I want the people of Choiseul to know that the government still really cares about education in every nook and cranny in this country. I think Reunion Primary, there are a number of schools, Mr. Speaker, but approximately 12 schools are under the DVRP for some sort of facelift. And I want to commend the government for taking the opportunity to ensure that our school plant, which is approximately now, most of them, about 50, 60 years old. Because, Mr. Speaker, if you have to think about some of the things that happened under the watch of the member for Micoud South, he comes here and he plays. He doesn't know. And I have stayed very clear of that, because I've made it clear that I am not attacking people. But once you put yourself in a position for me to divulge truthful information, I will. Because let's just take one example. The Vieux-Fort Infant School, sometime in 2010, approximately $100,000 was spent on the roof of that school, under the then watch of the member for Micoud South. By 2011, another $50,000 spent on the same roof. By the time I became minister, they were still calling for another $50,000 to be spent on that roof. Spent close to $200,000. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? When the school now, which is under the BIP project, is now being refurbished, the entire roof has to be discarded. A whole new roof has to be put in place. I am not quite sure who the contractors are. But I just want the member for Micoud South to know, do not bring yourself into positions where you can be embarrassed. I have stayed clear of the politics of school buildings. And he knows his family has been involved in most of the works that go on in schools in our country. Mr. Speaker, I want to commend the member for Vieux-Fort North and the Minister for Agriculture for what he's doing with our school feeding program, strengthening the school feeding program in our system. A number of schools had never been on the school feeding program. And we can see that St. Lucia, while the school feeding program may have started somewhere there about 1980, but this year, in the last year and a half, we've added an additional 13 schools under the school feeding program. And I want to commend the member for Vieux-Fort North, the Minister for Agriculture, who has been spearheading through his ministry funds with agencies like the FAO to ensure that most children are provided with a hot meal at schools. Because irrespective of what we think, sometimes some people look at schools like St. Mary's College and St. Joseph's Convent and they think that these schools do not need school feeding programs, but they do. The students may be very capable, but there's a need sometimes for these students because we also have students who are not as privileged as others who go to these schools. So I want to commend the member for Vieux-Fort North. One of the objectives of the new thrust in the school feeding program is that most of the food that is used in the kitchens will be produced by the students themselves. And we were very good in seeing that with our visit. Again, the Minister for Agriculture, the member for Grosili, myself, and other ministerial personnel to go to the Grosili Primary School and for us to see the children in their gardens harvesting tomatoes that could be used in the kitchen. It speaks of the work that the Ministry of Agriculture is doing to have what you call food security in this country. Mr. Speaker, I also want to take this time to thank the Boca Group, who have taken it on themselves to help the people of Canaries Soufrière. Because 3 schools have been helped by the Boca Group for the school feeding program. And the schools that we talk about are the Canaries Infant and the Canaries Primary, as well as the Bouton combined. I think it's when corporate citizens like these come on board that they help the government to ensure that it gets its mandate of ensuring that young people's lives are enriched. And it's not only the Boca Group. Lucilec and a number of other private companies in this country continue, and citizens, as the minister is telling me, they continue to assist with the food that our children receive in schools. It is very important, and most educators around the table, because there are plenty of educators around this table, they know that, according to Maslow, if you are hungry, you are not able to concentrate on trying to learn. This is what Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about. Mr. Speaker, I want to move to the education enhancement through information communications technology. when the Minister of Finance, or he was then leader of the opposition, put in the manifesto that we would give every child in our secondary school a laptop in Form 4. Of course, the ministry, with the blessings of the government, have got it now to be given to students in Form 3. But when he had this the first year, there were many who said that the government was wasting money giving children laptops.
That's true.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the new education plan, and even the education plan 2009-2014, which was designed by the then Minister of Education, it's clear that education must go in the direction that the world is going. The world is going in a state where information communication technologies is what will get our students to where we want them to be. Mr. Speaker, last year, after the government gave the first batch of laptops, I think some 3,500 laptops were given in our schools in the first batch. And a study was done to ascertain the impact of that program. It showed that more than 98% of our principals and our students and teachers, even parents, were saying that this program is a very good program. They commended the program. Two things that were very obvious for them that needed to be adjusted right away was, one, that we needed to have more broadband and Wi-Fi in our schools, because with so many students having laptops, we needed to give them access to the internet. And the second thing that was needed, and we knew that was so, was that more teachers needed to be trained in using the new technology. Now, there was a project under the Ministry of Education, again, under the watch of the member for Miku South. Over 12 million euros. That project was a disaster under his watch. I've stayed far from him. But it was a disaster because so much money was spent and yet the goods were not delivered in our schools. That project was supposed to get teachers integrated in ICT. But it will take this Labour government, with the assistance of friends and the work of different public servants, to ensure that the teachers are getting the ICT training that they need. This year in this budget, there is $134,000 put so that teachers could get training in information communication technologies. Mr. Speaker, there is a proposal by the Ministry of the Public Service to ask the NTRC to make some of the monies under the USF fund available for us to put broadband in schools. That proposal is for approximately $3 million over a period of 5 years. This is how we expect to get more children using their computers in our schools. Mr. Speaker, the students have called laptops everything. One of the very nice names they use these days, everybody loves that guy's name. They call it Kenny Tops. Because they say, well, Kenny was the first prime minister to give us the tools of the 21st century. In fact, when I was teasing my daughter, because now she's in Form 5, she said, Daddy, you're very lucky that they didn't call it Robert Tops. But I say, but somebody came to my rescue and a student said, but no, it has nothing to do. It is because it's an endearment. It's a term of endearment. We love our Kenny Tops because we can sit at home and do our SBAs. Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank, in this house, we want to thank the government of the people and the people of Venezuela for last year, or this year really, the academic year beginning September 2014, 2015. the Venezuelan government made 7,000 laptops available to the people of St. Lucia. In that way, we are able to give all the Form 4s, give the Form 3s as we move the policy towards Form 3. So that means this year coming, the next academic year, 2015-2016, we will only now be giving Form 3s, and we can continue to serve our students, to give them the tools of the 21st century. Mr. Speaker, there's been a lot of work in terms of ICT. Even our libraries have received ICT upgrade, because you live in a world where the index card will no longer work. Efficiency is important. I want to commend Dr. Fletcher and his team for the work they are doing in that ministry. It enhances our educational outlook in this country, because the various ministries of government must work together to ensure that the goal of the government is to propel the country forward. You know, Mr. Speaker, I have heard a number of persons, they chastise the Minister of Finance. You know, we seem to have a fetish with leaders. And each leader will come, some, yes, some. For example, when you don't give anything, they complain. When you give, they say you give too much. The Minister for Finance continued to put $1.3 million for parents whose children will still go to secondary school for the first time. And some of the people who complain, they go and collect the $500 check, you know. They do. Because unless you reach a point where you don't have $500 to give to your child, or to have to buy the uniform, the books, you will continue to complain. Mr. Speaker, I understand that very well, because in the Castries South that I represent, I started a program in 2007 where I gave as much as I could by friends donating $400 to students as a bursary. I understand it as a teacher, I have seen it. All of those who are teachers understand it. So when I have people complaining that the government is giving, they're giving, and they complain that the government is squeezing the people, I want to know, how can the government be squeezing people and still the government is giving, and you're complaining that the government is giving too much? So I want to commend the Minister for Finance for continuing with the Education Access Fund so that our students can get this $500 voucher that will assist them in the entrance into secondary school. There are still a number of children who are the first in their families who are going to secondary school. 2006 is just yesterday when we achieved universal secondary education, a foresight of the Labour government. There are people who are still today tell you every child should not be given secondary education. Mr. Speaker, what sort of a world do we live in when people say education, secondary education is not for everybody? Tell us that we should not have everybody doing the same things. But don't tell us that some children do not deserve to be in secondary school. The more access you give to education, the better the chances of your students. Tell that to the Eastern Asian countries. Tell them that. In the last results of the science and math tests, the top 4 are in Asia. And they invest heavily in their children in ICT. That's where they realize the world is going. Mr. Speaker, in 2004, just want to bring something here. 2004, the government, between 2004 and 2005, the government came up with a project, the OECS Skills for Inclusive Growth project. That project lingered until about 2006, but it was implemented in 2007. I want to commend all the people at the ministry who worked tirelessly to ensure that project was a success because of the framework that they developed to ensure that today the government of St. Lucia, through the Ministry of Education, was given that responsibility now because of a very good framework to be able to deliver the Caribbean vocational qualification. I know a lot of the members of the Parliament do not understand what the CVQs are. But the CVQ is really a system, the system CARICOM instituted to facilitate the movement of citizens across the region. It also assists in the workforce development by enhancing the competence, confidence, and performance of persons to international standards. I want to thank the people in the TVET unit of the Ministry of Education and the St. Lucia TVET Council who work extremely hard to ensure today that people who take different courses, whether it is in apiculture, which is bee farming, that they, or CMOS, that they can get a certificate that they can use, which is portable, that they can use in other Caribbean countries. Mr. Speaker, this is how things are done, and I want to commend the Minister of Finance for making the money available for the continuation of that unit in the Ministry of Education. Mr. Speaker, to show you how important this is, NELU, which is the National Enlightenment and Learning Unit of that Ministry of Education, generally that unit will go throughout the country and they will do what people used to call night classes in schools. But today, NELU has come up where they have taken part in what they call strengthening the second chance education program outlined by the Caribbean Examination Council, where people who have either dropped out of school or who never had an opportunity to go to school can now go into certain programs and they can also be certified. You have people like seamstresses, plumbers, all these people, they used to get multiple certificates, but these certificates really had no currency. But today, because of the CVQs and other things like the CCSLC, NELU is doing a fantastic job, and I want to commend the members of the NELU unit, the unit at that ministry, for the work they are doing with our people. Those of us who had an opportunity to go to primary school, an opportunity to go to secondary school, we may not appreciate what persons who never had that opportunity, because there are thousands of St. Lucians who never had that opportunity. And I will go everywhere I go, I will continue to say, my father was one of those persons who never had that opportunity. But I want to commend the Ministry of Education for sticking with such programs. Another project that is going very well, Mr. Speaker, and I want to commend the Prime Minister for continuing with it, under the NSDC program, the Prime Minister continues to fund the SMILE program. And there are so many programs that NSDC has implemented. Single mothers, which is a SMILE. They've implemented the YEP program. They've implemented a program called some Women Empowerment Women. All sorts of programs. I want to commend the director and her team at NSDC for continuing to push the agenda of this country to making education a vehicle for progress in this country.
No program for men?
There are always programs for men, because I must tell you, member for
Men need a program.
Member for Vieux-Fort North, just about 2 months ago, I saw a young man getting involved in his craft as an electrician, and I said to him, where did you get to learn to become such a qualified electrician? And he told me, at NSDC. And he said to me, thanks to the vision of the Labour Party back in the 2000s for putting a program like this in place. And I want to commend the government for continuing the program and to ensure that young St. Lucians, again, who didn't have an opportunity, can get that opportunity to qualify themselves in that regard. Mr. Speaker, we hear all sorts of erroneous and misinformation, and not just misinformation, Mr. Speaker, it's a matter of doing a disservice to our country when people say that this government took out the transportation subsidy from the schools. Mr. Speaker, that is so far from the truth. This government continues to subsidize transportation for school children in this country. And I made the point that when we put the Miku Secondary School on the shift system. The children had to go from Miku village to Angers. The government of St. Lucia expended some $70,000, additional that is, to ensure that these students would have got to school. Mr. Speaker, I want to say the government continues to subsidize transportation, and you will only see these amounts go down when the partial zoning has taken full effect. Partial zoning will not take full effect until another 2 or more years, because more students will go to schools in their communities. And even when more students go to schools in the communities, you should be assured, Mr. Speaker, that there will be children who will need help getting from home to school. Because you can take Miku South as an area. And one of the things about these transportation subsidies, Mr. Speaker, you have to figure out which communities benefit most from these areas. You know. Miku South, Miku, the general Miku area, is one of the areas that benefits the most. And it is not because, I'm not just trying to make it look like they ought not to. But I'm saying even when you will have students going to schools in their communities, there will be a need for a child who's all the way somewhere in Miku South, in one of the places I want to say in Lexi Balka, or the area not, that might be somewhere, Blasha, who may need to go to the Miku Secondary School, and that child will need assistance to get to school. So there'll always be transportation subsidy in this country. Lacoville, thank you for that. Mr. Speaker, I want to move to the human resource section of the ministry. Under the watch of this government, there's been a deliberate effort to increase the number of scholarships that are given to St. Lucian students. St. Lucia has an insatiable appetite, I must tell you. Even when we're only at about 8% from what I'm told, from the figures, we do believe in higher education.
That's right.
Our people believe in higher education, and they educate themselves. At Sir Arthur, for example, we have increased the number of bursaries for students at Sir Arthur. And the government will continue to do the bursaries for Sir Arthur Lewis Community College. But the government also, this year, we say thank you to our Cuban friends for increasing the number of scholarships for medicine in Cuba. And I think this came out of a discussion with heads of state, in particular the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, who would push for more Cuban scholarships for our students. Mr. Speaker, the only sad thing about it, and I hope we can get, because up to a week ago, there was still, from what I understood, there's still one scholarship there nobody had applied for, dentistry to Cuba. And I hope by now, Mr. PM, that somebody would have at least now applied, because I did send out some invitation out saying that the ministry was saying they needed to have at least one candidate for dentistry because there was a scholarship.
Honourable Member, you have 15 minutes remaining.
Thank you very much. I am not hearing the members on my right and left, because I did send them out that. I did send out this. But I think by now they may just have. But it just shows that we do have opportunities for our students. Mr. Speaker, the government of Venezuela has made available 23 scholarships for medicine for our students beginning this year. In fact, and this is something some people tell you, some people make all sorts of excuses. There was a time when our children were going, our young people, well, our children, they were going to do nursing in Cuba, about 300 of them. Some people stood and they said, some of the people didn't qualify. Why are they going? Education is not about how you come in, you know. Education is what you get out of it and how you use that education. In fact, Mr. Speaker, myself and the member for Babono, as Minister for Health, will make a trip to Venezuela to ensure to ensure that we know under what conditions our students will be housed in Venezuela. We want to ensure, because the PM did say that he wants to ensure that we were aware of all the conditions that our students will be housed. We're not going through Trinidad. Mr. Speaker, I need to say that we've made lots of headway with our partnership, trying to work out this partnership with UWI. The government of St. Lucia, along with other governments, another two governments, St. Vincent, Antigua, the arrangements that we will make with UWI. We have had perfect arrangements with UWI over the years. But as we move towards having our own community college become a university college, we need to have some discussions, and discussions are ongoing with University of the West Indies into how and the arrangements that will be made with regard to UWI and SAF. I want to commend the local team for sticking to the government's vision that even when we have a relationship with UWI, we want it to be clear that we should be in a position to also have relations with other institutions and not just UWI. And I think the Vice Chancellor designate, who's going to be inaugurated on May 30th, he's made it clear to me, because I have kept pushing that point, that St. Lucia will want to ensure that even when it keeps all the arrangements with UWI, it wants to offer to also have its autonomy, that it can deal with other schools. It can engage other schools. For example, we have engaged Seneca College of Canada to introduce, as I said last year, the early childhood program at Sir Arthur Lewis Community College. Mr. Speaker, I want to commend the government in my last few minutes for continuing to invest in the NICE and the STEP program. While I've heard, you heard that the government is unconscionable. But the very people who tell you the government is unconscionable, the NICE program and the STEP program are programs geared towards providing employment for St. Lucians who have not been employed for 6 or more years. And they, on radio, chastising the government for putting money into the NICE program and the STEP program, but they come in this house and they lie to the people, oh, the government does not provide for them. It was the last administration that took the step out. I was working in Basel Joseph one time in 2006, and I warned the people of Basel Joseph, I told them, if you take the Labour government out, there will be no step. And one young lady told me, Kite 2 months later, after the government came in, they took the step out and she was crying to me until I told you. But this government is a government of conscience. The government of a social conscience.
Passion.
We call ourselves a Christian country. We call ourselves a Christian country. What Christianity is about is that you will be able to think about your neighbor and how you can assist your neighbor. That's the biggest thing of Christianity. But don't go and say on radio that, oh, the government is wasting money in the NICE program and the STEP program. And then when you come here, you see the government is doing nothing for the people of this country. Now, that's not what is really bad, The same people who call out on the radio stations, they call out here that the NICE and the STEP is waste of money. They call you in hushed tones and they ask you for a little work under the NICE. Hypocrites! Mr. Speaker, Christianity is about assisting. And it doesn't, and those in Castro South know me. You can call Castro South people. Robert Lewis, I have persons in my constituent who are upset with me because there are people who have never supported me in the 2 elections I have run. And I make sure they find a job because I know what it means. People have choices, political choices. Once I can defeat the candidate of the United Workers' Party, I'm fine. I take care of everybody.
And you'll do it again?
I will do it again if I have to. But I think it's hypocritical when people come here and they say the government is wasting money in the constituency. I want to commend the Prime Minister. He took a program that the former Prime Minister had, the CDP, but what he has done, He has ensured that all the money of the Taiwanese goes into the consolidated funds, not into the pockets of members. There's accountability. Yeah, there's a lot of noise in this country. You know, the Prime Minister has something saying, when he's unfettered, he'll speak. Well, maybe I'll speak sometime. Because what I find in this country is that we speak about issues that we want to speak about. There are reports from public servants to show how monies were abused in the last administration. But I don't hear it being spoken about. There are people in the gallery who sit in the gallery pretending to be leaders. They are gallery parliamentarians, my colleagues say. And they don't remember when they were in government. These are people who never spoke out on behalf of any poor person in this country. I never heard the former Minister for Tourism speak one day about the poor people of this country. Today.
He fired 9 of them.
Yeah, he had 9 hostesses in Sufra. You know, somebody saved him in 2008. Somebody saved him because he was showing up in Castries South. But somebody saved him. They let Harold deal with him instead.
He wanted to go to Castries
In
South.
Sufra. But I think we have to be consistent with what we stand for. If we say the government is doing nothing about unemployment and the government is pumping, in fact, the Prime Minister can say, he said it, you get assistance from friendly governments to keep these programs going and you still complain that these nice programs should not be done. What are you telling the people? Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the government for the insurance for young people, the sportsmen. I think that is commendable. Young sportsmen. I know the Minister for Youth Development and Sports is excited about it. And again, he has chastised me as his former cricket coach. But I'd remember that as a young player, if he had that sort of insurance, he probably would have been a little further ahead. Though I have already told you, it's not to do with the coach. People have to learn to listen. The coach can only tell you so much. You have to apply yourself. But I want to thank the government for this. While on the opposition, you have people pushing, agitating in this country for strikes. Because I heard a member for Castries South is saying they're going to keep pushing. All right, I'll keep pushing the Orange campaign. Keep pushing the Orange campaign, because when the people will come to you and tell you, go again and strike when we don't produce fuel in this country. Go and strike again when the cost of fuel increases. I hope you will go out with them. When? Because remember, the burden of government is not to make people believe that monies go in the pockets of parliamentarians. Because governments raise money. If the people want certain things done, they must pay for it at some times. They have to.
I'll remember you have 5 minutes left.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, there are those who don't care, Mr. Speaker. They don't care. Mr. Speaker, I want to put it on record here. I have been called by some hotel chain saying that there will be dismissal of workers. What I'm asking those who are very loud on the airwaves is go speak to their friends and tell them stop sending workers home. Because as Minister for Labor, I refuse to sign work permits if people send people home, and you have work permits to be signed for persons who are non-St. Lucians. I will not sign as Minister for Labor. Talk to your friends about trying to keep St. Lucians in positions. Don't make them redundant only to bring people through the back door as new persons. As Minister for Labor, Robert Lewis will not sign. PM will have to take another portfolio out of my hand if they want it signed. I will not. Yes. PM, you'll have to take the portfolio. Because there are those who incite. They incite things in this country. 2006 was a clear example of it. And we begin to see the signs once again. St. Lucians must be watchful. You think they care about you? No, they don't care about you. Some then Minister for Tourism said if the people wanted to show their disgust over the tuxedo villas, they should go to Marchand.
Yes, yes.
As if Marchand is only for the people who don't know what it means to eat at a hotel.
Yeah, yeah.
But we brought it back.
Yes.
These people don't care about you. They don't care. And I have warned some members here. As long as you're sitting in the House of Assembly, these people will try to use you for their own purposes. But at the end of the day, they don't care about you. Who are you? Who are you? Mr. Speaker, as I end, I want to say to the people of Basse Saint Joseph, I have been very patient. And I know they will get the much needed human resource development centers. They heard it. They heard it for the first time in the PM speech. It means that it is about to happen. It's not going to be like what the past government did. Go and give the people a signboard and pull it out after the election. That's exactly what happened. They started work, and as soon as the election was over, they took it down. They still do
This
that.
is those that if electricity poses.
Mr. Speaker, I want the people of Cicero also to know, because I get a lot of people of Cicero say, but you see Basse Saint Joseph all the time. It's my whole constituency. But Cicero and Basse Saint Joseph also, their roads, Marigot, we are aware. I can tell you that the government is never asleep in that regard. It might take a while for the government to do all the things that are needed, but the government is still committed to assisting. And I can tell the people of Cicero, you heard it, that the Cicero Road will be dealt with in this financial year, so Minister Pierre can come and have some lunch with the elderlies again. But I want to say that unlike past years, 28 years, where those who have made noise about Cicero, I grew up in Cicero. Nobody tells me about Cicero. If I don't want to know something about Cicero, I don't know. Nobody can lecture me about Cicero. Because I know 28 years ago, people were resettled in Cicero and roads were left. These people were treated like cattle. But under this Minister of Finance and my representation, the people of Lower Monkey Tongue today, they can walk with just one pair of shoes. They don't have to have a different pair of shoes. Because there's been work done under the CDP. And I don't want anybody to tell me enough has been done. More needs to be done for the people of entire Castro South area. Because all of them. And when I hear noise being made, I sat on this side of the house. Not one time was I consulted about CDP. Yeah, the CDP money always went to the candidates.
That's right.
Who were supporting the party.
That's right.
But at least this Prime Minister, this Minister of Finance, he has made the CDP available to every MP. And I want to advise the member for Mico South, and I agree with him, if he doesn't get his, he needs to go and ask for it. Because I'm almost certain, and I know, the member for Dennery South gets his fair share because I can see works in this constituency. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you very much for allowing me to present. And I want to say to the St. Lucian people, this government will always have a conscience, because only the government of the St. Lucia Labour Party has shown the poor people of this country that it cares about them. I thank you.
Honorable Prime Minister.